43-20. I told y'all Georgia's going to whip Florida's ass, and they did. And I'm not going to let that go. All you have to do is watch these teams play. One of them's not in the same universe as the other, and that's Georgia. Make sure you're signing up for our newsletter. I'm putting the link down below. I wasn't surprised. The only thing that surprised me today was Florida going on the field on the first drive and scoring a touchdown. I wasn't shocked with that because if you know Kirby's teams, you know how this goes. I mean, often the first drive of the game is the best drive of the game for the other team, and that was the case in this game. And it made it seem like the game was closer immediately than it really was. But man, it did not take long. I'm on a teetering surface here, so I'm gonna have to be delicate. But here comes Georgia right down the field, field goal, then a 41-yard touchdown from Lab McConkey, and all of a sudden, like Florida just couldn't do anything hardly. They just could not do anything. So and then 10-7 in the first. Edwards 2 touchdowns within not even 3 minutes of themselves, and then the safety. This could have gotten even worse for Florida than it did. Why can't Mike Bobo call more scoring plays? That's what I want to know. I mean, you're only starting the game off going field goal, touchdown, touchdown, touchdown. Why are you punting? You should score every single time that you have the ball, right? Okay. I thought this is an excellent performance from Georgia. I thought they would play well. I think that the challenge against Missouri, the challenge against Ole Miss, the challenge against Tennessee, those are going to be different. They're going to probably be more difficult games. I could see Georgia doing something like this to Missouri as well, just to be honest. But, Georgia understands moments, y'all. They just do. Again, let me get back to the offense here. They go field goal, touchdown, 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 4 plays and punt, 8 plays and punt. Now, I don't have a problem with 8 plays and punt, personally. If you're going at 40 yards, that's okay. Halftime. And then they take it 8 plays, 30 yards, punt, and then you go field goal, touchdown, touchdown. I mean, like the game was over, obviously, at that point. But Georgia's first 2 drives were 71 yards and 66 yards. So this is the first time in a really long time, if ever, Georgia's beaten the Gators 3 years in a row by 20 or more points. If you were reading our picks this week, we all picked the Dogs to cover. I mean, I want to see what the Missouri line is. I want to see what the Missouri line is before I kind of get going on this. But I've been coming to this game since 1997. And probably Claude Felton, who works at Georgia, is the only person that's been here in this capacity more often than I have. And I'm going to just tell you, and by now you've read Riding Home or listened to Riding Home, the Florida fan base feels it. They know they're in trouble. They know they've got a real problem on their hands as it relates to Georgia. Now, everything else, Florida's, they're hanging in there. The win against South Carolina was a great win, but they've got some really challenging games coming up. This is worse than Georgia and Florida in the 90s. Now, here's why. Florida, first of all, Florida won 2 national championships in the 90s. They won 1. They played for 2, but they won 1. The other thing that's hovering over this is multiple coaches now. I mean, like at first it was just, Ray Goff can't get it done. I mean, Ray was the coach until 95. And then Jim, in his second year, wins against the Gators. But that was totally dominated by Florida. But Georgia's still a pretty good team. Florida's not going to end up ranked this year. They're not beating Florida State. They're not. I mean, I don't think they will. So we'll just see. But I think they're not like really in trouble. It's just they're not Georgia right now, and like that is a really damaging thing. It didn't even seem like their fans were into it, man. Like they all left. They got here late. They always get here late, and then they left early. And recently, they pretty much except the 2020 game, which I was here for that one too. They basically just leave. Okay. Lately, for sure, like there's not been a competitive game since the 20 game. And even that was, I mean, Florida had total, we haven't had a quasi nail biter since 19. Like that's what this game typically is. But right now, Georgia's just got such a stranglehold of this rivalry that it's going to take more than what Billy's doing right now to get them where they got to go. And I think they need to be given – that first drive was excellent, but you're not going to dink and dunk these guys. You got to hit Georgia in the run game. You got to be explosive down the field. Florida was somewhat explosive down the field as time went on. But listen, here's the other thing. Y'all know I love the drive chart because it just tells you everything, right? All right, so here's here's Florida. So here's Florida's game. All right, they go touchdown, which was a great drive, and then sixth place, 13 yards, punt. Go for it on fourth down at the 31. Now I'm going to tell you two things that I like. I like points, and I don't mind punting it. That really hurt them right there. They got, they're just that's what the Gators will talk about. But let's just say they go down and score that they still don't win the game because after that drive, two plays fumble. The drive after that, not just a 3 and out, but a block punt soon thereafter, and then they go in the second, and then they go 3 plays and out. I mean, it was just a comedy of errors, and they halfway got the ball down the field only to run out of time and have to punt the ball. Not run out of time, but they just ran out of momentum. And then in the third quarter, they finally get the ball back after Georgia punts, drives the field and punts. They go 4 plays, 13 yards. I couldn't do anything. And then the next one was down. I mean, they got their ass whipped. All it is they got their ass whipped. That's it. Like there's no other way of saying it. I mean, when you look at the box score, it tells you all you need to know. Carson Beck with a big game, no doubt. He did have a big game. 19 for 28, 315, 2 touchdowns. One to Ladd, who made that one easy. One to Dylan Bell. I'm gonna tell y'all right now. I mean, Georgia only wound up with 171 on the ground. That could have been 200, no problem. They barely missed a couple of runs being huge. One from Dylan Bell, and I think there might have been another one from either Kendall or somebody. There was a hole. There was a huge hole there, and they just got sort of tackled late. But this is like 34 attempts for 230 yards. Like that's not good enough. There's no threat of anything. You're not even going 10 yards of completion if you're Florida. So, and it's got totally their ass whipped in the first 3 quarters. In the fourth quarter, I'm not going to say it didn't matter, but that was for development. If you're Georgia, that was development. Average per play, Georgia was almost 2 yards more a play than the Gators. A pretty good punting day for both teams, to be honest with you. But then, I talked about this. Like Florida actually did a great job today of not a lot of penalties. Both teams combined 4 penalties for 27 yards. Like that's a clean game. That's an easy, great game. And everyone's like, oh, what happens if the Dogs something? Shut up. Like, stop doing that stuff. What happens if Florida has trouble? We saw it today. They got their ass whipped, right? What happens if Georgia turns it up? What if Georgia gets turnovers? Well, we saw that today. And I don't know how many points it turned into, but it turned into a lot. It seemed like to me. One was a touchdown for sure. I think the other was a field goal. And I don't know how you score a block punt, but I mean that's not a turnover. But it's just what everybody's going to keep talking about the Auburn game. Like, dude, like the Auburn. Yeah, if you turn it over twice and allow 14 points, it's not that hard for the other guy to make it a close game. But if the other guy's going to win, they're going to have to do something other than kick field goals, which is what Auburn did. And in Florida's case, they just didn't. I mean, there's just nothing scary about them. Like, I can't believe I'm saying that after all these years. Again, we're talking about the Florida Gators here. We're not talking about, South Carolina or somebody like who rarely has like killers. These guys have had them for years, but boy, since Kirby's been around, they're not there. They're not there. You had the one win in 2020. That was a great win for Florida, and then it all fell apart. It just all fell apart, and they're not all the smug Florida fans that I remember so well for such a long time. I wonder what they're doing now. Do they watch these games? The fans. I'm on the Florida side. You can't see because of all the condensation, but the Florida fans were just like, I think they were happy they didn't get beat worse, to be honest with you, because it could have been worse. It could have been 50-14 or something like that. I mean, like it could have been. It wasn't. But like Georgia bogged down. They bogged down. Georgia punted from the Georgia 42. I'm sorry, the Florida 40, the Florida 42. I mean, like that's 14 more points, or just even 6. What was the final here? Yeah, 43-20, man. Like that's a beating. And that 20 play came on the last play of the game, basically. I mean, this whole thing has changed. I was talking to a good friend of mine. I'm not going to say who it was because, I don't reveal everybody I talked to. He had been around Georgia and the Gators for a long, long time. And he had been around during a lot of Mark's time. God, it was so good to see Mark Richt. But, you know, if you love Mark Richt, you need to tell him. You need to tell him. And Coach Richt, I love you. I think you're awesome. I think that you've been important for people, not just the players that play for you and all this stuff. You've been an important person in people's lives, including mine, for the record. And I think that people need to tell Mark that because he doesn't look like he's doing great in terms of walking around. On camera, he's outstanding. He's so good on camera. But what Mark was dealing with in the 2000s and what Georgia was dealing with in the 90s. I mean, Florida's not that anymore. It's not them. And maybe this is the Florida, that people should get used to. This has been a rough decade for Florida. They're not going to have a losing season this year. They're 5-3. They still got to play Kentucky. Excuse me. They still got to play. I don't think they want to play Kentucky again. They still got to play Missouri, Florida State, and LSU. So they could go 6-6. But that was a brutal schedule for them. And yes, I'm cleaning out my shoes because of the sideline, man. Like we got to get security figured out here. Like you can't be coming to us in the middle of plays telling us to move because the quarterback can't see the play clock. They've been coming down the field the whole time. Like get your act together. I want this game to stay here, but every time I come here, I'm reminded why people don't want it here. Okay, and now I'm Team Jacksonville, but I'm wide-eyed about it. I'm not some idiot that just came off the train from Hayhire or Cochran or someplace. I've been around the block for a while. They got to do a better job. They didn't even have food for people downstairs. There was one basket of water, wasn't even cold, of water. People are working. It's physical. It's a manual labor. I don't understand why they don't have that. It's in many ways the facility is much less nicer than it used to be, but I'm just reminded every time I come down here of how hard it can be to be down here, the location of the stadium and all that stuff. So when they redo this thing, there are things to work on. And honestly, I've said this a lot of times, turn this game over to the Gator Bowl. Let the Gator Bowl run it. Don't put the burden on Florida Florida runs this game for you. For those of you, this is a lot of inside baseball right now. Florida runs this game. So that's another game that's not in their home. They do it once a year, and you can tell. And I don't mean that bad. It's better than it used to be. But it's just a mess all the time. It's not as bad as it used to be. But if this were in Atlanta, it would be first class. It just would be. And that's, you would have a proper place for the visiting press conference to occur. I mean, that has only recently gotten better. I wouldn't say it's great, but oh man, Shane Beamer would freak out down here. But I think, it's in my formative years from, I was 13 in 1990, okay, until through college and all this stuff. I mean, Florida was not just whipping Georgia's ass. They were essentially the premier program or one of the premier programs. They're not close to that now. And Steve leaving and, you know, eventually being replaced by Urban Meyer, what you have, most places aren't Georgia. Now, when people say that, oh, you're such an elitist. No, it's just what it is. And what I mean by that is, and not a lot of places are like Florida too, by the way, but you should win at Georgia, and they do. You should win here, and they haven't these last 10 years. Why not? What's going on? Why are they not winning down here in a big way? And, the more people I know that are coaching in the league and been around the league, and I mean, I say this all the time. Florida doesn't take it seriously like Georgia does. Not now. They did, but that's not the case anymore. Urban's not the head coach. It's just not the same as it used to be. And Eventually, it will be, but this is a bad run, and they could have played this game 10 times, and Georgia might have lost once. I mean, it's I don't know, and I think Carson played really well. I know Carson was full blown Carson today, and he and I know what that means. But it was good to see. I mean, there's just nothing to this kid. The kid can play. He's a baller. I mean, everything we heard, everything we saw. I mean, it's been the case for a long, long time, and you're seeing like this team is a very real threat, of course, to win the national championship again. And if they play like they did tonight, they will win the national championship. But you've got a really rigorous 3 game stretch that's coming up here, and they're gonna have to survive it. They don't have to blow people out. They need to win the games. I think they match up pretty well against Tennessee, but they're gonna have to go up there. I think they match up physically better with Missouri and with Ole Miss, but they can lose those games. And I think that's the part that when you're coming into this thing, and the crowd is going to really matter. Mizzou has been better at home than on the road, but they're a good team. Like they can totally beat Georgia, and I think that Georgia's got to continue to play like this. And I don't. There were a lot of people. People got to stop thinking that just because Georgia loses a player as good as Brock Bowers, that they're just gonna how simple are we? That's what I just don't know. It's not. This isn't the Lakers and they don't have Kobe. Like this is a football team. You have dozens of players who matter, and the other guys make plays too. So I just was unimpressed with that line of thinking. Yeah, they lost Brock Bowers. I mean, how long will they lose him for? And just because he come back doesn't mean that they're just going to roll over people. I mean, you got to go out there and play. Other people have players. Florida doesn't have the level of player Georgia does right now, and that's the part that Billy's going to have to get right. And you know, it's just not close right now. And I do remember a lot of the smugness. It was rolling pretty thick for a while, and it's gone. They just don't. They know it's not there. I mean, they have been dominated by their rival now for a while, and the guy that's the reason for the domination doesn't seem like he's checking out anytime soon. You thought Steve Spurrier was bad for Georgia? He was. Kirby might be worse for Florida. He might be. They got it. They're going to have to get it together one way or another. But I think for the Dogs, I mean, this is scary. Don't mess with them. Don't they can do this. How many times more? I don't know, but they're going to have to be methodical about this. They got a tough run. They got a tough run. It's as tough as anybody in college football now. They got obviously Missouri, who will be top 12-ish. Ole Miss certainly could be top 10, and then you're gonna have to go on the road to Tennessee, and then Georgia Tech, whatever, and then you're gonna probably have to play Alabama or LSU. So don't worry about the rankings on Tuesday night. They don't matter. You just have to win the games you play. Georgia did that tonight, 43-20, total ass whipping.